When it comes to the Titanic and Britannic wrecks, many have noticed both ships have a break in the bow section. But what caused this? Was it an engineering failure, or could it have been natural causes? These are the questions we are aiming to answer in this video. Starting with the Titanic, we find the bow is deeply buried in the sediment from her 2.5-mile fall from the surface on April 15, 1912. During this descent, the Titanic reached an estimated speed of 35 miles per hour or 56 kilometers an hour, which contributed to the damage along the bow section. For this video, we will mainly be looking at the forward section of the bow up to the third cargo hatch and the cranes. On the morning of April 15th, as the bow hit the ocean floor, it embedded itself deep into the sediment by approximately 60 feet, covering most of the hull damage from the iceberg as seen here. Now, as you can tell here, it is almost up to the anchor, but it's not quite there. And you'll see in a moment, as we move further back, the amount of damage the bow actually sustained during this period of time. As we move further back along the bow, we find some significant damage around the second and third cargo hatches. Some of this damage includes the large hole in the hull on the starboard side, as well as a section of the deck where it's completely separated off the side. Now, I am using VROV Pilot for this video, which is based off the actual scans of the Titanic, but in a lower resolution to help show the damage on both sides. Moving over to the port side of the bow, we find similar damage as seen on the starboard side. Now, looking at this side of the bow, we also see plates that have separated, and this would have happened during the impact with the seabed, which we'll look at in a little bit. While the bow seems to be in good shape, considering the forces from the collision, the water pressure, and other factors, this can actually be misleading. As shown here, the bow is broken and in the same areas as the Britannic, but for similar reasons actually. But before we look at the cause of the damage, let's move on to the Britannic and look at the damage and do some comparisons. On the morning of November 21st, 1916, the Britannic struck a German mine approximately 2 miles off the coast of Kia. Unlike her sister ship Titanic, the Britannic would sink in only 55 minutes and unfortunately would take 30 lives to the bottom of the sea with her. What sets the Britannic sinking apart from the Titanic is that the Britannic's propellers were actually in motion until just minutes prior to the final plunge. The Britannic sank in only 400 feet of water, which has helped both preserve the Britannic, but it has also caused additional damage to the ship's bow. The Britannic herself is 883 feet in length, and when she sank, the bow actually impacted the seafloor before the ship could completely flood and sink. Looking at the bow section, and here on the Britannic, we can see the bow is completely torn off just before the superstructure, in the same area we see damage on the Titanic. Now, was this caused by the mine explosion, or was this caused from engineering failure? Well, we'll be looking at that in a little bit. What sets the Britannic apart from the Titanic is that after the Titanic disaster, she went through several upgrades, including a double hull along her boiler rooms and engine room, which was to help prevent future sinkings like the Titanic, and she was also outfitted with enough lifeboats for all passengers and crew. In the case of the Britannic, the 55 minutes she survived after the initial explosion may have actually been thanks to the double hull, and the speed at which it flooded. The main reason she rolled onto her starboard side is mainly due to the water pressure on that side of the ship compared to the port side, which was slowly rising and as the Britannic took on more water. The Britannic, unlike the Titanic, was outfitted with watertight doors up the B deck. These watertight doors would usually have been closed during the day, but at the time of the mine collision, they were actually open for a shift change. Due to the watertight doors being open at the time, she quickly took on water, and this contributed to her quick sinking. Now let's move on to the damage to both ships and see if we have a similar pattern. Back at the Titanic, we find most of her damage is centralized around the second and third cargo area and was not visible below the seabed. Now, we can't be exactly sure about the damage under the sediment, but it's believed the bow is crushed down quite a bit, similar to the damage seen on the Britannic's forward bow. Most of the damage to the Titanic's bow is related to the speed she collided with the seafloor, which was approximately 35 miles per hour or 56 kilometers per hour at the time of impact, and this would have sent a shockwave through the bow, causing much of the damage seen along the sides and along the top of the bow. When we add in the water pressure which was inside the bow at the time, from flooding at the surface to the final descent, we find the pressure would have been amplified by the collision, which caused the starboard hull to rupture and for all three cargo hatch covers to break off of the bow. As the bow came to a stop, the superstructure itself would have bent back, and we see this in the damage where the plane is separating from the bow in multiple places along on both sides. Other signs of the strong impact from with the seafloor include the anchor crane, which is swung around from its original position facing towards the wheelhouse and superstructure of the ship. Now, when comparing this damage to the Britannic, we find similar details. The Britannic, unlike the Titanic, sank in only 395 feet of water, which meant the Britannic's bow was already touching the seabed when she was sinking. What happened in this situation was that the bow was being pushed into the sediment, and this caused the cross section of the forward bow. If we move back to the breakup zone of the bow, we find that this was not caused by the mine, but by the pressure applied to the bow when the Britannic was sinking. The bow of the ship is only designed to withstand so much pressure, and the Britannic was no different. As the Britannic sank lower into the water, this put enormous strain on the bow, and it ultimately broke the bow off of the Britannic in this area. After this break, the rest of the Britannic slowly sailed onto the seafloor after rolling over onto her starboard side completely. Unfortunately, like the Titanic, we cannot see the damage done to the starboard side of the Britannic from the mine. For years, the Britannic's bow damage was believed to have been caused by the mine or an internal explosion. But as more research was conducted, it was found that the bow suffered this damage during the descent and not from a primary or secondary explosion. So, in conclusion, which ship bow has the most damage? Was it the Titanic or the Britannic? Well, you might think it has to be the Titanic. Sea is further below the surface than the Britannic and hit the sea floor at a faster rate of speed. And while this is true, the real answer is the Britannic. The Britannic has more damage to her bow based on how soon the bow broke off from the ship and enormous weight and pressure applied during the sinking. While the bow itself appears to have less damage than the Titanic, we need to look at the damage to both sides. The mine that Britannic hit would have left a significant hole in the starboard side of the ship, and when the Britannic hit the sea floor, the weight of the ship itself helped tore the bow at this particular section. One major difference between the two wrecks is the Britannic's fireman passage is still intact, but the boiler rooms cannot be accessed due to being blocked. Unlike the Titanic, which has significant damage at the fireman's passage in the lower deck. The fireman's tunnel that's shown here is a recreation of what the Titanic's fireman's passage would have looked like. Now, this section is crushed from the impact with the seafloor, and as far as I'm aware, no one has ever accessed it since April 14th, 1912. Overall, while both ships have significant damage based on the evidence presented, the Britannic shows the most damage with the bow curved out, similar to how the bow on Titanic is pointing into the sediment. But the Britannic also has damage from the mine she hit, a full break-off just before the double hull began, and other damage from crushed areas around the forward cargo hulls and compartments that exceed the height of the known damage on the Titanic. So, was the damage engineering failure or natural? Looking at the damage to both ships, it appears the damage is actually natural based on the position of the ships, the speed at which they hit the seafloor, and the forces involved upon hitting the seafloor. For both ships, the damage seen shows the engineering at the time was right on point and actually helped save both ships from further damage due to the construction methods used. While the Titanic did have number 3 rivets instead of standard number 4 iron rivets, it does not appear to have had a major effect on the damage seen from the final collision with the seafloor. The bow of both ships broke at a weak point, which is expected based on the forces that would have been applied, and no ship is built to withstand. So overall, the damage does appear to be natural over engineering failure. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if anything is wrong on the damage, etc., please let us know in the comments below. While I have researched both ships for over 20 years, I may have missed some details or may be wrong in some points, and I welcome any improvements or knowledge. Thanks for watching, and if you like this video, please hit that subscribe button for more content like this one coming soon.